The year is 2003, and people are camped out around the theater to see if Frodo can finally destroy that damn ring. This was also the year when Chappelle got a show. Everybody started using iTunes, and 50 Cent was in the club. But we're not here to sip Bacardi like it's your birthday, because today we're going to be counting down Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed games of 2003. Go, 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 Shawty! If you're a fan of Metroidvania games, then you've probably wondered which franchise is better. Well, we finally got the answer to that question in 2003, when EGM reviewed Metroid Fusion and Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, both on the Game Boy Advance. So, what's the result? Castlevania just barely came out ahead with an average score of 9.3 versus Metroid's 9.2. Now that 1/10 of a point may not sound like much, but it was just enough to boot Metroid Fusion right off the top 10 list. Ah, take that, Samus! Shane asks what is honestly a pretty good question. 3 wonderful Castlevania Game Boy Advance games in as many years, how do they do it? A deal with the devil? A legion of undead coders slaving away at night, perhaps? All I know is that Aria of Sorrow is the best GBA title to date. Mark agreed, saying that the subtitle should have been Ode to Joy, and raving that he hasn't been this glued to his Game Boy Advance since Metroid Fusion. Everybody loved the new lead character and ability to collect souls, as well as the massive bosses and incredible level designs. Their biggest complaint? Well, the game could have been even longer. Even though they were a little greedy, the editors sharpened their teeth and gave Castlevania Aria of Sorrow a 9.3 out of 10. Of all the games from 2003 that we're going to be talking about today, only Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time has the distinct honor of being turned into a big-budget Hollywood movie. Ooh, I'm not sure I would have been able to predict that 17 years ago when Ubisoft decided to reboot Jordan Mechner's brilliant 1989 computer game where an unnamed prisoner spends 60 minutes trying to save the Princess of Persia. The Sands of Time reimagined the story and setting, adding time manipulation and incredibly detailed levels to explore. It's the kind of showy game that makes a great first impression, which is probably why it only took Disney 7 years to turn it into a blockbuster movie. The EGM critics were quick to compare this Prince of Persia reboot to both Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and The Matrix, 2 pop culture nods that may seem a little odd at first glance. Sean likened the game to an enchanted carpet ride through 1001 Arabian Nights, saying that it was pure magic. Soft lighting effects and elaborate, detailed architecture give the entire experience the quality of an opium-induced vision where time travels at the speed of your imagination. Even stuff as trivial as continuing your quest after an untimely catastrophe sparkles with creativity. The only complaints that the 3 critics could cough up was a fidgety camera and a couple of battles that overstayed their welcome. For a brief moment, EGM was able to stop time and give Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time an average score of 9.3 out of 10. If you're a longtime fan of this series, then you already know that EGM loved The Legend of Zelda. They scored Majora's Mask as the best reviewed game of 2000, Ocarina of Time the second best game of 1999, and even those 2 Game Boy Color games from Capcom managed to rank in the top 5 in 2001. What you might not know is that one of the franchise's most beloved installments, A Link to the Past, barely made it onto the list back in 1992 with a score of 8.75 out of 10. Only coming in at number 7, it was topped by Sonic 2, Contra 3, Turtles 4, and Madden 92. 11 years and 130 issues later, and A Link to the Past is finally getting a second life on the Game Boy Advance. And while it may appear to have lost some ground, now only coming in at number 8, in reality, it scored much higher against more fierce competition. I guess what I'm trying to say is that EGM finally figured out that the 16-bit installment is one of the very best Zelda games. Phil was quick to point out that this Game Boy Advance release was more than just a straight port, thanks to the addition of a game called Four Swords. It's a wicked cool blend of Zelda and Gauntlet, and you'll have to use some clever cooperation to defeat enemies and solve puzzles. CJ said that Four Swords was the most fun I've ever had with a 4-player Game Boy Advance game. Sure, he also liked replaying A Link to the Past, but Four Swords was definitely the star attraction. Adding a little something extra to the Super NES port has been Nintendo's strategy since the launch of the Game Boy Advance. And with an average of 9.5 out of 10, it seems to have paid off well with The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, and Four Swords. We already know that the EGM editors loved Virtua Fighter 4, as it shot all the way up to the 3rd place position in our list of the best reviewed games of 2002, topped only by Grand Theft Auto 3 and Halo. Now Sega is back with an updated version called Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution, and once again, the critics love it. In fact, it earned the exact same scores as the unevolved version, thanks in large part to the important improvements, additional new modes, and the cheap $20 asking price. Shane liked the game so much that he gave it a perfect 10, a full point higher than the month's other big fighting game, Soul Calibur II. Here's a lesson on how to improve on perfection. Take the PS2's finest fighting game, add 2 creative new characters, program in scads of intensely challenging AI fighters, offer up mad unlockables, and spit polish the already amazing graphics. Then proceed to sell this tricked out remake for only $20. Che agreed, noting that even if you've seen most of this before, the real reason to plunk down $20 is for Evo's superb quest mode. It may have been more of an expansion pack than a new game, but Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution averages an impressive 9.5 out of 10. As it turns out, Virtua Fighter 4 wasn't the only game to show up on EGM's best reviewed list 2 years in a row. When Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty was reviewed on the PlayStation 2, it earned a score of 9.5 and wound up as the 5th best reviewed game of 2002. 1 year later, and now Konami's mega popular sequel has found its way to the Xbox. Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance not only boasts slightly better graphics and sound, but also a bunch of new extras and modes, even including a skateboarding minigame. This was enough to earn the Xbox port a 9.5 out of 10, the exact same score as the PlayStation 2 original. It was clear, Metal Gear Solid 2 was a must-play game, no matter which console you owned. Mark was quick to rave that the sharp graphics, fantastic sneaking fighting shooting mechanics, and attention to detail still amaze. Plus, all the added VR missions take advantage of the game's biggest strength, gameplay, and cut out one of the real weaknesses, silly storyline. Milkman agreed and called it essential gaming and compared our main hero, Raiden, to a Backstreet Boy. Yeah, it's clear that the editors were still a little bit sore about that Raiden twist. But hey, at least now, a year after the PS2 version came out, they can speak openly about it. Those much-touted VR missions helped Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance earn a stealthy 9.5 out of 10. Now, one thing that we don't see a lot of in these EGM best reviewed lists are game based on movie properties. Okay, sure, there was that one weird year when both Alien and Die Hard showed up on the list, and who can forget that GoldenEye 007 came in number 2 in 1997? When it comes right down to it, you can count the number of movie games we've talked about on only one hand. Well, now you're gonna need a second hand, because Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic definitely deserves a spot as one of the best games of 2003. This was not only a great role-playing game with familiar Star Wars trappings, but it was also the best reviewed Xbox exclusive of the year. This was BioWare at the top of their game. Brian called Knights of the Old Republic a total blast that is a must-buy. What makes KOTOR so appealing is that from start to finish, you direct how the adventure unfolds. You shape every aspect of your hero's being, from physical appearance and class attributes to the color and qualities of the lightsaber. Joe praised the excellent story, likable characters, and snappy sense of humor, but did find one thing to complain about. Knights is such an all-encompassing experience that when you're away from the game, you'll end up talking about it to everybody you know. Believe me, there are worse problems to have. With an average score of 9.5 out of 10, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic touches down at number 5. With critics growing bored of Tekken and Street Fighter going into hibernation, all eyes were on Soul Calibur II to be the fighting game champion of 2003. This was, after all, the sequel to a Dreamcast launch game that was so good that it completely overshadowed the return of Sonic the Hedgehog after a 5-year absence. Yeah, that's hard to do. Now, if you watched our EGM and the launch games series, then you already know that Soul Calibur was the first launch game to ever earn a perfect 10 score. So, all eyes were on Soul Calibur 2 to see if lightning could strike twice. Well, spoiler alert, the sequel didn't average a 10 out of 10. But you know what? It came damn close. When it came to the EGM reviews, the magazine tried something a little bit different. Instead of each critic getting their own section, the review plays out more like a back and forth conversation. And I have to admit that I'm not a big fan of this. It ends up becoming a Virtua Fighter 4 versus Soul Calibur 2 debate, which just isn't very quotable. Shane complains that the single-player mode sucks and how Soul Calibur 2 is a step back from the Dreamcast game. Sean agrees, but argues that it's not supposed to be played solo, and the fact that there are barely any new characters isn't all that big of a deal. They ultimately agree to disagree, and everybody but Shane gives it a perfect score, which means that Soul Calibur 2's Soul still burns with an average score of 9.7 out of 10. Of all the Mario Kart games released in EGM's lifetime, Double Dash is by far the most controversial. Competing magazine GamePro seemed to have a bipolar relationship with the game, giving it high marks in 1 month and then immediately turning around and calling it the #1 lowest moment in Mario's history. Yeah, lower than the Mario Brothers movie, which only came in at number 5. EGM disagreed with this take. Not the one about the Mario movie, but rather that Double Dash was a low point for Mario. 2 of the 3 critics gave the game perfect 10s, and the one holdout came as close as he could at the time with a 9.5. Shane puts it this way: I don't care if you're 12 or 42, the day you get Mario Kart Double Dash will feel like Christmas morning. Pure, exhilarating glee will envelop your soul, demanding that you keep playing just one more game into the wee hours of the morning. It's that good. Demian gave the lower score, but still concluded that while none of these changes are revolutionary by any stretch, they do put a new twist on the time-tested Kart formula, making for even more frantic multiplayer action. And even more ways for Shane to lose! The rivalry lives on, as Mario Kart Double Dash finishes at number 3 with an average score of 9.8 out of 10. Now, I want you to remember all the way back to the early 2000s, a time when the most controversial thing we had to talk about was the cel-shaded look of the Wind Waker. Believe it or not, from the moment Nintendo showed off the bright, colorful, and cartoony style of this GameCube game, Legend of Zelda fans were livid. They took to the internet to complain that Link and the rest of the game looked like it was made for children and not the serious next-generation Zelda that they wanted. 2 years later, EGM would mock this outrage by fooling their readers into believing that a new and improved Wind Waker was going to be released with brand new realistic graphics. That was an April Fool's joke, and the fans were not amused. You could still see some of the outrage and skepticism bleed into the Wind Waker reviews. Shane addressed this right at the top, saying that he didn't approach Wind Waker with the euphoric glee that he's felt for past Zeldas. In fact, he was kind of wary. I couldn't help but be skeptical about the radical graphical overhaul, the oceanic overworld, and even the fact that Link has to rescue his sisters. Luckily, all these fears were, in the end, unfounded. This is a worthy inheritor of the Zelda crown. An instant classic, no gamer should miss. Mark wanted to give the game a perfect score, but argued that Wind Waker is a bit too easy and got tired of taking that boat everywhere. He concluded that it's one of the most unique and enjoyable games ever. Play it! Almost 2 decades later, I would argue that the stylish art design holds up, while all those other 3D Zelda games look woefully out of date. But even with the controversy, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker sets sail with a 9.8 out of 10. You know, 2003 was a great year to be a GameCube owner. Between Mario Kart, Zelda, and now Metroid, Nintendo managed to dominate the top 3 spots of this best-reviewed countdown. But while the Wind Waker and Double Dash both came close, only Metroid Prime was able to earn perfect 10 out of 10 scores from all 3 editors. Up until that point, this classic from Retro Studios was only the 11th game in EGM's entire history to earn that score, joining the ranks of Metal Gear Solid, Majora's Mask, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. It was a first-person adventure game that was not only a sea change for the franchise, but also proof that the unique perspective could be used for a lot more than just shooting. The EGM editors couldn't get enough of Metroid Prime, and for good reason. Shane used his review to confess something big. I gotta buy my friend Chris a copy of Prime. I bet him 2 years ago that the new Metroid wouldn't even earn a silver award. Oh, I'm glad I was wrong. He called it the best GameCube game yet and gushed about the spectacular boss fights. Miguel also had a similar change of heart. I was totally ready to hate on Metroid Prime prior to experiencing it firsthand. But the minute I set foot on Talon 4's lush overworld, I was a believer. It was simply mind-blowing on so many levels, you must experience it. While other companies were giving you standard sequels and updated ports, Retro Studios offered something completely new and unique, which is why Metroid Prime is Electronic Gaming Monthly's best reviewed game of 2003. Well deserved. Hey, thanks for watching the return of Electronic Gaming Monthly's Best and Worst. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we're going to be posting 2 episodes every week leading up to the new year. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite game of 2003? Look, because of magazine lead time, some of the games we talked about in this episode actually came out in 2002, but they were reviewed in early 2003. Yeah, try not to get too confused. In other news, we'll be back tomorrow with our list of the worst games of 2003. Then we're gonna settle into our regular schedule next week. That's the best games on Tuesday and the worst games on Friday. Got it? Oh, so don't worry, we still have plenty of reviews and Game Over episodes scheduled, all coming out in the next couple of weeks. So it's not just gonna be a bunch of EGM from here on out. We're gonna try to be balanced. We got something for everybody. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.